This is Inner Healing Paths podcast. Here we discuss the healing of the mind, body, soul, and spirit through a variety of different paths. We have emotional and spiritually minded conversations centering on ancestral healing, psychology, astrology, yoga, meditation, magic, and indigenous spiritual practices of the world. I am your host, Rosa Shetty, and I am so happy you are here. Welcome. Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of Inner Healing Paths podcast. Before we go into the actual episode, just want to give a few announcements. Some of you have done the 21-day challenge to connect with your inner child through the guided meditations that I've been providing through Instagram Live. But if you have not, I put together a 21-day journal. It's a downloadable copy, an e-book that you can download and use to guide your 21-day journey, something that you can do on your own. I've included specific prompts for each day, and I have a place for you to write your notes and write whatever insights came through for each meditation. So it's just a wonderful tool that you can have. It's accessible. It's easy enough to follow. If you're interested in this, head over to my Instagram account at innerhealing_paths or Inner Healing Paths podcast. Just one word. I'll also include this in the show notes, so you can just click on the links. I also want to let you all know that I'm actually doing a raffle, and the raffle is to celebrate the beginning of this podcast and to say thank you to those of you that have subscribed already. The specific instructions to enter the raffle are in my Instagram account. So again, go to the link in bio and you will see the instructions for the raffle. And it will be running from Tuesday, October 4th through Friday, October 8th. And that Friday night, I'm going to go live to announce the 3 winners. So the raffle includes a book titled Reconciliation, Healing the Inner Child. And it is written by my favorite author, Thich Nhat Hanh. He is a Buddhist philosopher and master. And it will also have a healing meditation box that will include Palo Santo, sage, and lavender. It would have a couple of healing crystals and smudging spray. And again, these are all tools that can help you enhance your meditation practice. So if this sounds like it's something you would be interested in, again, check out my Instagram and sign up. So with that covered, we are ready to dive into today's episode. And I am so excited to have you listen to the conversation that I had with the wonderful Dr. Alejandra Acuña, PhD and LCSW. We had such a juicy conversation about the importance of connecting with our ancestral roots as an integral part of our healing. We talked about the intentional connection with our ancestors and bringing them forth in our day-to-day as a source of personal empowerment. She so candidly shared her story of healing and specifically her journey of remembrance and reconnection with her spiritual gifts that have been passed down to her from her previous generations, from her abuelitas. I know that you will love this episode as much as I did. I do want to give a brief disclaimer that this episode does not treat or diagnose any disease, ailment, or any mental health condition. The information that is shared here does not substitute for healthcare or mental health services of any kind. Guests have a right to express their views, and this also does not imply an endorsement of any entity they represent. So without further ado, here's our episode with Dr. Alejandra Acuña, take a listen. Hi, Alejandra.
Hi, Rosa.
I'm so glad that we're able to connect here and that you can join our podcast here.
Me too. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. And, to get started, are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's go for it. Okay, so Alejandra, for our listeners that are not familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit more about you and just where you're from and what kind of work you do?
Wow, that is such a big question. Okay, I wish I would have written my thoughts. So let me see. Let me start by saying, because it's so important to me. Let me start by saying I'm 53.
Okay.
I just turned 53, September 16th, which is a big day for Mexicans.
Happy birthday. Happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thank you. And I'm Chicana, so it's a big day for me too. And I was born in 1968, which was the year that the Olympics were in Mexico as well. So I was conceived during all of that. Let's see. So I am a social worker, a mom. I say that because I feel like I got my LCSW to be a mom. It's taught me so much about parenting and raising my daughter, but also my daughter has taught me so much about relationships and love and healing and the work. I think it made me a better human being a mom, but it made me a better social worker, 100%. So yeah, that's my street cred. When I was younger and didn't have a daughter, clients would ask me, do you have kids? And I didn't understand the question. I'd be like, I have nieces and nephews and I study child development, but that wasn't what they were asking. Like they were asking, do you get it?
Right.
Will you judge me? Do you know how hard it is? Do you know how close you can get to throwing your baby out the window because you're so tired and you've tried everything? And it's like, now I can confidently answer, yes, I do. I get it. I understand.
You get it.
Absolutely. So that's my biggest street cred, is that I'm a mom and that we both survived that. She's 20 and she's a junior at NYU. Let's see, I'm an associate professor at Cal State Northridge, which is also a big deal for me because that's been recent. I was granted tenure. And so there are not a lot of Latinas with a PhD. There are not a lot of Latinas in academia. And I think it's less than 3% Latinas who are tenured. So it's a pretty big deal. And so I want to represent that. And I want to say, if there are any people of color out there who want that path, you've got an ally, because I know it's not easy. And I did not get here alone. I got here through the love and support of many, 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 many people, friends, family, students, mentors, peers, colleagues. And so my ancestors. So anyway, I wanted to put that out there. What else? I do a lot of consulting work. And so I love doing research, program evaluation, clinical supervision. And what else? And still to this day, I love doing family therapy. It's one of my favorite things. I love families come together. Whenever everybody shows up, like mom, dad, and the kids, and whoever's in the home, whenever they show up, I get really excited because it tells me like, we're gonna make something happen here. Because I tell them, even though this is the last place you want to be, the fact that you're all here, it tells me that, like, bump the stigma, bump el que dirán. Like, we love each other and we want to make it work. We want to figure this out. And it's that love for each other that gets me excited, because I know, oh, we're gonna do some good stuff here. So I've done a lot of things. I continue to do a lot of things. There's so much more I want to do. But that's a little snapshot of who I am, professionally speaking, and my identity as a mom. I think I mentioned I'm Chicana Mexicana. I was born in Los Angeles, and both my parents are from northern Mexico. And I love saying that. My mom was from Chihuahua. And most people from Chihuahua tienen la fama or like they're very well known for no tengo pelos en la lengua. Like I'm very direct, straightforward. And some people think like, oh, that's the Americanized me, or that's like the blunt me. But no, that was 100% Irene. That was my mom. And so I was actually the shy, kind of nerdy kid. And if it wasn't for my mom, who was like the life of the party and freaking cool, I think like I would just be a dork in the corner still. I mean, I'm still a dork, but at least I know how to talk to people now. So anyway,
Absolutely.
that's a little bit about me. I don't know if that was too much or, but
No, it's perfect. And there's so many things that you shared just in that little introduction that I want to hopefully follow up on. But just want to say thank you for, for representing, because representation matters, especially in academia. And I don't think, I went to college, I don't know, in 2000, I graduated high school 2002. I don't think I remember I had a Latinx or Chicana, and I did not have a professor that was a person of color, and
wow.
so, and I mean, of course, I went to a very small school, and it was a very specific demographic, but I didn't have that, so growing, so just hearing you say that and hearing that statistic of only 3% is just so, I don't know, it just gives me and then hopefully our listeners too, the motivation to keep going in whatever path professionally or otherwise you're pursuing. Because if you're here in the States and you're listening to this, most likely than not, we are still not representative of the demographics or the population that we serve, whether that's in schools, in academia, and the social work practice, we're still underrepresented, right, in those professional roles. So thank you so much for acknowledging that. Yeah, and in a way paving the way, right, for others.
Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, it's been challenging. There was a woman, I'm going to name her Sara. She recently passed away from cancer, and she was a santera, and I met her almost 10 years ago. And I loved her because I think people don't understand the role of like santeras or readers in our culture. It's not so much that it's like magical realism or um, shortcuts. It's like whenever I would have a conversation with her, I felt like I'm going to cry. I felt like she understood me, like she saw me, she got me. And I was thinking like, man, no wonder santeras and readers are so important in our community, because that's what therapy should be. Like when you feel God, when you feel seen, when you feel understood. And I felt like she read my mind in a good way. You know what I mean? And so I remember her saying to me, because she was bilingual, but because I spoke Spanish, she would always do her readings in Spanish. She said to me, it's been a difficult road for you. Like you've really had to struggle. Pero ha sido como una limpieza espiritual. And it's been like a spiritual clearing. Mm.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh my God. That resonates with me as well so deeply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like I embraced the struggle. I had faith in the struggle. I had support in the struggle. And it's all good because I feel like it got me here, and I feel like I'm stronger, I'm cleaner, I'm more whole, integrated, which is the point of therapy. I think it's the point of any healing, which goes back to your first question. What is the point of healing? I don't care what modality, I don't care if it was like our ancestors 50,000 years ago. It's always been about integration, wholeness, uh, being all put together, coming back to ourselves and to our whole selves, mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. And so anyway, what was the question?
No, that was perfect. And yeah, no, the integration of the mind, soul, spirit, heart, body, everything, right? I am right there with you on that belief that it does take the workings of everything together. And I think we before going into that, we were just talking about how this lady, this Sarah, how you just felt so seen and validated just through her connection with you and her presence with you in that moment. And I feel like it was that, like, you know, feeling deeply understood, right? And which is
Oh my
part of
God,
representation.
100%. So
Yeah.
it's so funny because she's an older woman. She looked amazing. She was in her 70s, but she looked amazing. And I would tell her, because I never met my grandmother. I'm going to talk about my maternal grandmothers in a bit, but
Yes, please.
I never met them or really knew them. And so she was like, and my mom died when I was 35. And so I always felt like, and I'm going to go in and out of tearfulness, and I'm just going to
Oh,
embrace it.
yes, please embrace it. Absolutely.
Um,
Thank you.
and so I felt like I've, it's so important to have elders in our lives, either present and living or their stories. And so anyway, so when I met her, even though it was not anything I'd ever done before, like I'd never been to readers before, it was very unusual for me to consult her. But a good friend of mine referred me to her. And I was going through a lot in my life and needed some guidance or just some support. And so it was just beautiful. So anyway, I feel like you're like my grandmother. She's like, abuela, abuela, ¿por qué? Like, why a grandmother? I'm not that old, I'm not that much older than you. Like, no, I don't mean to. And
Yeah.
so it's just, she was so wise. And she was at that age. Some people don't get at that age, at any point in their lives, and some people earlier than later, but she just was like, she gave it to me straight. She just told it like it is, you know? And she was from Veracruz, and she's the one who said, where's your family from? And I said, my parents are from Chihuahua. And she said, oh, la gente de Chihuahua es conocida por ser muy franca. I'm like, yeah, that's
She
right.
knew.
She did. And so she would just give it to me straight. And she was like, a ti no te gusta la hipocresía, you don't like hypocrisy, y a ti no te importa los chismes, and like you don't care about gossip and people talking badly. And I'm like, you're right, I don't. And I just feel like she got me. She just understood me oh my gosh, just like my mom did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like sometimes when you're an outlier, or when you're a vanguard, or when you do things that is out of the norm, or you step out of your gender role stereotypes, you're kind of like a freak of nature. You kind of don't fit in a community where it's so important to belong and fit in. And so I felt like with my mom, even though I was like nerdy and shy and just so different, she like got me. And she used to say to me when I was little, ay, Alejandra. I mean, I was like 4 or 5. Like, that's how little. She'd be like, ay, Alejandra, tú eres mi antena. Estás en todo. Like, you're in everything. You're always like listening and aware of everything. And what's funny is when my own daughter was born, Paulina, I tell her, man, if I was an antena, you're a satélite. Like, you're a satellite. Like, she channels so many levels of knowledge and wisdom. She's amazing. But anyway, so so yes, I felt seen and understood. And people always said, oh, you just wanted shortcuts. You wanted her to tell you the future. And it wasn't like that. It was like, you know what, Sarah, I leave here feeling like you get me, you see me, you read my mind. Like I feel really seen, understood. And that feeling alone is freaking amazing. And she wasn't a trained therapist, but she did it. And that inspired me to like, oh, when I'm with people, like, that's what I want to do. Like, I not necessarily read their minds, but I want them to feel like I get it. I understand them. I see them. Like, I want them to feel understood, because I think that makes us feel like, we say validated, but I think that makes us feel like safe and whole and home, and like not crazy. Like, no, this is, of course, this is part of the range of human emotions and human behavior. Like you're in the circle. Like you're not out of the circle because you feel that way. We're all in the circle. It's just the circle is that big and has that range of diversity.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't I don't feel that everyone has a capacity to offer this to others, you know, to really witness someone else in their, and to deeply understand. I think we can train in it, but there's some folks that are just born with this gift, and whenever you're around them, you just feel completely, just, you know, completely taken care of, almost like this, like abuelita energy to them, right? And that's something that I know that it's just, you can't really train for that, you know, you can't really go to school for that. It's just, some people just have that energy to them. And it sounds like your friend, she was very much the embodiment of that energy, right? That abuelita, even though you said, you know, she probably would not like me calling her that.
No, Sara, never mind, Sara. You're my Sara, you're not my abuelita.
But you know, it sounds like she just embodied that warmth, and you just felt it when you were with her.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And she would just say it, like she would say, tienes buena energía siempre, like you have good energy always, or she's, ay, eres bien dulce. Like they would just, like she'd be doing her job and these things would just come out. And that was the other thing. It's like, again, she did so much that I feel therapists, we need to do in that. Like never leave a compliment on your tongue. Like if you see it, then say it, you know what I mean? And the beauty is that it's not like to like flatter people, but it's when we see things genuinely in another person and we say it instead of like keeping it to ourselves, if it's genuine and real, it'll resonate. And it's almost like just holding up a mirror. It's like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just literally holding up a mirror and showing you what I see. And when it feels like, yes, you see me. Yes. When it resonates, it's beautiful because it's not like flattery. It's just the truth. It's just, right. I'm seeing you accurately and you feel seen accurately.
And the thing with your word is that it's so powerful, right? So when you speak onto someone that type of genuine feedback, you know, just telling them, wow, this is great, whatever it may be, it really, the vibration of that, I believe, is what we receive. You know, I knew someone, or I know someone that was a teen mom, and she said now she's in her 30s, but she remembers that she was 18, I think, when she, you know, she found out that she was pregnant. And she said, I will never forget, everybody around me was just like whispering about me, talking about me. And this one lady from church just went up to me and grabbed me by the shoulders. She didn't really have a relationship with this lady. The lady just went up to her, grabbed her shoulder and said, you're going to be an amazing mom. I can see it. You are wonderful. You're amazing. You're going to be amazing. And she said, to this day, she said those words stayed with her into this and have and just shifted. And she is, I mean, I've known her since then, and she's been an amazing mom. Everybody says, I don't know how she did it. But I mean, that's how powerful words, like what you just said, just saying something encouraging, if it comes from the heart, it's going to resonate deeply with the other person.
Amen. Yeah. I want to pause and just invite our ancestors into the room.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
As alone as we feel sometimes, and especially during the social distancing and downright social isolation, I feel like it's easy to feel alone, but we don't walk alone. And I want us to just imagine, like, I know you see behind me, like my office and my, you know, paintings or pictures.
I love it. Yes.
Thank you. But I want you also, I'm going to imagine and invite you to imagine like 50,000 years of my ancestors standing behind me.
So beautiful.
So even though my parents have passed, and even though Sara has passed, like elders that I really relied on for their wisdom, I know that they're here. And that's why I'm not afraid of the other side, because I know that they're there. And I know that they're here. And I know them, especially my mom. I know that she freaking loves the fact that I'm naming her. Like, she's like, hey, like, make sure you give me credit. I'm like, yes, Mom, you have all the credit. So I want to invite my 50,000 years of ancestors, because I did not get here alone. they all struggled, and it was a spiritual cleansing for them too to get me here. And then you, Rosa, where are you from? Where are your ancestors from?
Oh, thank you. My ancestors are, I mean, my family's from Mexico. I consider myself Chicana, Mexican, American. You know, I was born here in California, but, you know, my heritage is from Mexico, and, you know, I'm first generation. So I'm still very connected to my, you know, to my heritage. You know, my parents are still around. So, you know, that's still part of my everyday.
Absolutely. And what part of
Yeah.
Mexico?
Yeah, my family's from central Mexico. So my dad is from a town near Mexico City, about 30 minutes, Toluca, that's the name of the city. And then my mom is from Guerrero. So she's from a town near, most people know Acapulco. So, you know, just for a point of reference, so she's from a town near, about a couple hours from Acapulco. So they're from central Mexico. And
okay,
yeah.
Rosa, I know you came to my house. I wish I had known that your mom was from Guerrero, because so I have a mask from Guerrero that I want to give to you the next time I see you.
Alejandra.
I remember it was my second year internship in Marin County. I was at Bella Vista Elementary, and we had like a white elephant gift exchange. And one of the teachers had been to Mexico, and she had brought this mask. I think it was like a wedding mask from Guerrero. And I fell in love with it, and I just had to have it. And like it got stolen from me and whatever. And so I ended up paying another teacher, like, I'll give you money for it. Like, I want it. So I've had it all these years. But I think it's put away now. And now that I know that you're from Guerrero, I want you to have it. So the next time I see you, remind me.
Oh, thank you. That would mean a lot. Is it like what does it look like? Like a tiger? Or?
It's actually looks like a man. It looks like it's made out of wood, like porous wood, and it's rounded. So, or it's like half rounded. And then it's painted yellow. And the reason I think it's a man is because it's got like a mustache. And then it's got like some string in the back, so if you could put it on and, you know, would hold on.
And you said it's yellow?
Yeah, it's painted yellow. The wood is painted yellow in the front.
Let me grab something real quick that I have right here. Hold on. I don't think it's that, but this is like a small thing, but this is from Guerrero. This is very, these are earrings, by the way. But so when you started describing it, I thought that's what you were describing. Yes, I got these in Guerrero when I went.
Yes, so it looks very similar to that. Very similar. I mean, it doesn't have the ears, the teeth, but it does have teeth actually.
And these are masks. Yeah, these are masks traditionally, and people wear them for special occasions and more like traditional occasions. But anyways, I thought you were referring to something like this, but my God,
it looks very similar to that. Yes. That makes sense, because all this time, the only thing I knew about the mask was the teacher said she thinks it was from Guerrero. But that was all I had. And so that's confirmation that it definitely was.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's very, very sweet of you. And of course, I hope to go to your house again for we had a wonderful night that time that I went, and I'm looking forward to more of those gatherings, and, you know, just reconnecting with other ladies. That particular night, it was a lot of actually therapists, right? And social workers. I think most of us.
I think we gravitate to each other.
Yeah, and just it was a very juicy night. I loved it. But
me too.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to, so thank you for calling in our ancestors. Thank you for opening that up. And I know that a lot of your work, I think the way I came across your work was through I believe it was like a workshop that you did on just kind of the integration of traditional indigenous healing practices with our modern day mental health systems. And, can you speak a little bit more on that, and just kind of how you came across this path, and how you're merging these two?
Right. Thank you. That's a good question because it's definitely, I'm moving into semi-retirement and I just want to do that full time. Like that's all I want to do now. And I love that my pensions will allow me to do that soon. Um, so when I was in the PhD program at UCLA, I think it was 2010, 2011, something like that. I took a class and it was a graduate course in community health sciences. It wasn't in social welfare, but it was called Latin American Medicine, Shamanism, and Folk Illness. And I remember it was in the spring and I was like eating up all the reading, the lectures, the field trips, the videos, and I just could not get enough of it. It made so much sense to me. And I was so excited about learning about it. And there was a point where I was really sad that I hadn't been raised with this knowledge. Um, and then I just accepted, like, well, that was a missed opportunity, but I'm learning it now. And so, and nothing can stop me now from digging deeper. And so that takes me back to my own mom, Irene. She's like, I love all the times that you're saying my name. She loved her name. So I'm going to go back a little bit because if you want to know where this comes from, it comes from my ancestors.
Yes, please.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so being Chicana Mexicana, both my ancestry DNA and the history books confirms that as Mexicanas or Mexicans, we are indigenous Mexican, European, and African. Like those are the three major roots of our DNA and our culture and our even today. So here's my story. My story, I have to go back 2 generations. So talk about ancestors. I have to go back to my maternal grandmothers, Irene Sr. and Teresa. So Irene Sr. and Teresa were sisters and they were teachers. And okay, so Irene Sr. was married and had children, including my mother, Irene Jr. And then her sister Teresa was married and had children. And so Teresa was pregnant and she had a baby in November, Rosa Maria, my birth mother. And her husband died. Teresa's husband died. So she had to go to the cerros where it was very cold because it was winter and work as a teacher. So Teresa asked her sister, Irene Sr., will you take care of my baby while I teach, while I go work? And so my grandmother said, yes. So knowing my mom, Irene Jr., who was older than Rosa Maria, not only did they grow up, even though they were cousins, not only did they grow up together like sisters, but I'm so for sure my mom was like her mother, because that's just who my mom was. So they grew up together like sisters. Now cut to, 24 years later, my birth mother, Rosa Maria, is married and she's in a kind of an abusive relationship. She has a daughter. She has an affair and she gets pregnant. And that's where I come into the story because she has an affair in Mexico, Chihuahua, 1968. So she was living with her tia, but the tia that raised her, Irene Sr., and she was very depressed, not getting prenatal care. That worried Irene Sr. Irene Sr. talked to Irene Jr. Irene Jr. was worried, and Irene Jr. is in Los Angeles and says, send her to me, I'll take care of her. So Rosa Maria comes to LA. My mom takes care of her. I'm being born at General Hospital, and the doctors tell my mom, Irene Jr., somebody's going to die here. Either mom's going to die or baby's going to die. Somebody's going to die here. And so my mom, bien astuta, she decides to fill out the birth certificate with her name as mom in case, her sister dies.
Yeah.
And so my birth certificate reads Irene Acuña Cardona, as my mother. And so anyway, we both survive. My birth mother and I both survive. And we come home. And again, knowing my own mom, she was probably the one taking care of me and getting super attached to me because that's just who she was as a human being, as a person, never stopped. Always was taking care of babies and human beings. So I turned 9 months old, and my, I don't know how to turn that off so it doesn't make noise. Let me see options. I'm sorry, because I know you're recording and
Oh, yeah, no worries.
how do I turn it off? I wish I had the quit, maybe. Okay, maybe, and then options. Shoot. I don't know how to turn this off. Okay, anyway, maybe you can edit around the pings. I don't know how to stop the pings from my laptop. Let me just text the person, tell them I'm doing a podcast, not to ping me. Oh, to stop pinging. I mean, stop texting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go. So anyway, so I'm 9 months old. My birth mother decides, she wants to go back to Mexico. And she tells my mom, I'm ready to go home. Like, is it okay if I take the baby with me? And my mom was like, the baby's yours. Like, of course. So my birth mother takes me back to Mexico, and my mom just falls apart. She goes through a deep depression. She gets hospitalized. And so my birth mother hears about it in Mexico, and she calls her and she says, si te doy la niña, like, will you get better?
Oh,
And my mom's like,
yeah.
like, yes. And so my mom goes to Mexico and brings me home. And so that's my story. And the reason why that's so significant is because I really believe that my mom, Irene Jr., it was one of my soulmates. Again, she understood me like no other. I learned so much from her. She never met a stranger. I'm like this shy, nerdy, quiet kid, and she's like the life of the party. And just watching her and being mothered by her, like, I just learned so much. And because she was from Chihuahua and super open, like, we talked about anything and everything. Like, there was nothing taboo that we couldn't talk about. And because she was from Chihuahua, like cowboy boots and jeans, like, she was a super strong woman. And so, again, people think I got my feminism from the US, but no, like, my mom was so outspoken. And like, we'd be at the store and there'd be a big sign saying like, no exchanges, no refunds. And she'd be like arguing with the cashier. And I'd be mortified because I'd be like, Mom, can you read in English? It says no refund exchanges. And like, I just watched her like negotiate her way to a refund and an exchange. Like, it was just, she's just amazing. I learned so much from watching her. But she used to, and I don't always interview her, like ethnographic interviews. And I remember asking her about her own childhood. And one of the many stories she told me was that her own paternal grandmother, her father's mother, was indigena, totally indigenous. And she would spend summers with her. And I think she learned all kinds of practices from her paternal grandmother. And my older sister, so I have a sister who's 6 years older, and then I have another sister who's 12 years older. And my oldest sister, Irma, she remembers that my mom used to use el huevo for la limpia, and how they put the egg under the bed or the crib. And I could totally see that, because I'm so for sure that my mom learned that from her grandmother. Because my mom, even though she left those particular traditions behind, I love it, because in high school I would call her bruja. Ay, tú eres bruja. And instead of being offended or mad at me, she was like, see, I am. Like, super proud of it. Like, you see me, you get it. Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
so, yeah, totally spiritual. But she channeled it when I was growing up through our church. We grew up in a Pentecostal Christian church in East LA. And so anyway, all of that to say is, it's always been in me. It's been in my mom and my grandmother, and growing up in a Pentecostal church. I mean, I went to church 4 days a week, Tuesdays, Fridays, and twice on Sundays. And that's really where I got connected to my spirituality and my soul. And so I've been to like pipe ceremonies, Native American pipe ceremonies. I've been to Native American bear dances and sweats. And I remember being at a bear dance in Yosemite, and we were in this roundhouse, and the Miwok people were singing and chanting in their language. And I remember it didn't feel awkward or different at all. It just was like, I know what this feels like. This is church on a Sunday night. the spirit is moving and we're singing and I feel at home. And it's because my spirit knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
and so all of that to say that, my traditions are this syncretized, like, it's all spirit, it's all soul. Like my soul tells me what's what. And it's all, and when I took the class Latin American medicine, shamanism, and folk illness, when I read, I realized like everybody talks about mal de ojo, evil eye. Well, it's not just Mexicans, like Nigerians know about evil eye, like medieval Europeans, like Italians,
Exactly.
so when
Yes.
Italian people talk about evil, they're not stealing from us. Mexicans are not the only ones. And I had a student, because when I taught at Cal State LA, I had a student from Nigeria, and we were talking about the cultural concepts of distress in the DSM, and at the time it was the DSM-4, and I'm pretty sure Mal de Ojo was still in there. And I remember one student asked me, why are we talking about this? Like, I don't understand. And I said, because there's a lot of people who still really understand this as having an influence in their lives and on their health. And there was a Nigerian student, an immigrant student in the class, and she sort of spoke up and she said, yeah, no, in my country, like, we know, like, people can get killed. Like, it's no joke, it's serious. And so anyway, all of that to say that it makes sense to me that I really resonated with the readings on shamanism, and I finally met a shaman myself. And I've done shamanic journeys myself. And when I read about Huichol shaman, I read this book in the class called The Peyote Hunt. And the Huichol shaman was like, you people from the city, like, you judge us, you think like, oh, those poor indios. And he's all, but I don't feel poor at all. I feel freaking powerful because I
Mm,
have my
yeah.
history, my traditions. I see you guys running around stressed out over what? Over cars and things. And I'm not stressed out. I feel at home in my body and on my land. And when I read that, I'm like, I freaking get that, because I don't buy into the consumerism and materialism. In fact, the reason I'm able to retire in a couple of years at 55 is because I have very low overhead. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. I realized
No, don't worry.
I realized that debt is the lie of the man. Like, the man wants us to be indebted because then we'll be indentured servants. And I'm like, oh, I see you. I see you, MFer. Like, I want my freedom. I don't want your money or your stuff. I want my freedom. And so,
Mm, wow.
so,
Yes.
so, so when I read that, the Huichol, I'm like, I freaking get him 100%, you know? And so anyway, all of that to say is that I find truth wherever it is, whether it's a 4-year-old who I'm counseling because her mom just fled a domestic violence situation, and the 4-year-old's telling me, le digo a mi mamá que lo deje, que ya no regrese con él. Like, I tell my mother, leave him, don't return to him. Like, I just feel like
Mm,
truth is everywhere. And if your mind is open and your heart is open, and you're in the Bible, it says, if you have ears to hear, if you have ears to hear, then you had better listen. If you have eyes to see, then you'd better see. And I just feel like the truth is around us, and it's not in no institution, no country, no culture owns it. And I just feel lucky that I've been open, and I've learned from so many different sources, because the bottom line is the truth and it resonates. I went to a Christian college in Orange County, and I had a professor. I took a class on the Old Testament, and I had a professor. She was amazing. And she said, the prophets of the Old Testament, they didn't tell you things that, like, they didn't predict the future per se. They prophesied things that, if they didn't resonate in you, then, like, you were like, oh, this is not a good prophet. Like, you don't just follow prophets blindly. Like, it's gotta go deep, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I feel it too. Do you know what I mean? Like poets, when you read poetry and you're like, they read my diary, like, they were at my last breakup, like, how do they know? And it's because they're telling the la pura neta, the honest to goodness truth. And when it's truth that deep, it resonates. And I don't care where it comes from. Like you just know it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And what you just, I mean, you said so much, and everything that you said is so rich, and we can go, many different paths with each thing that you mentioned. But I think, the path, the healing path, like you said, the healing is everywhere and in all paths. And that's one of the reasons why I'm even doing this podcast, to be honest with you, is because I want to bring awareness to that it's not just through traditional psychotherapy process. It's not just through as faith, a specific type of faith, or through yoga. A lot of times people, they find one modality, let's say yoga, and it's like everything can be resolved with yoga. And it's like, no, we are beings that
Mind,
have
body, spirit.
multi-dimensional beings, right? And we need, you mentioned debt, you mentioned money. That's another huge source of healing, right? And that's a whole other path. And I feel like we're on the same wavelength, because absolutely, I feel like, there is no one truth, and I don't think there's any one culture that holds, that can say they hold the rights to healing. I had a teacher once say to me, there was a period of time where I was studying with a curandera teacher. I didn't finish my studies. It was very brief, but what I did learn from her, she said to me, la medicina es para todos, so she would get a lot of heat from people. She would get heat because she would welcome people that were, Mexican, American, white, all walks, and people would give her a hard time. And it's like, well, why? They're not Mexican. Like, why are they learning our traditional Mexican healing? And her thing was, because medicine is for everybody, right?
Yes.
No
I
one
love
owns
that.
this.
I'm gonna make a meme. Medicine, la medicina es como para todos.
Para todos, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you said that,
Yeah.
Rosa, because that's been my beef too. I see I see people who are like cultural gatekeepers, or like, all mine, no, don't share, don't appropriate. And I'm like, don't you get it? We need everybody to heal. I feel like, and white people even more so, like there's susto, cultural or soul loss. So when trauma happens, a part of our soul checks out. And shamans know ways to bring your soul pieces back home. Well, I think everybody needs, their souls to be whole, including white people, especially white people. So if anybody's walking around disconnected to their spirit and their soul, like that's not good for any of us. So if there's a tradition that they're willing to do to reconnect to their spirit and soul, I'm like, I'm all for it. Yeah, that's not, to me, cultural appropriation, man. It's like everybody has a right to healing. I love that. La medicina es para todos. What was her name?
Yes.
I want to honor her.
Maestra Cici. So she's on Instagram. If you want to, if for those folks listening, she's great. She's amazing. I learned a lot from my short time studying with her. So yeah, and I that resonates with me, because I do feel that there's a difference between those that want to take over and take ownership and claim it as, their own, like, I came up with this, and that's the appropriation, right, that we're talking about. And that's different. I see it. Yeah, I see that if you connect with it, if you're respectful of where it comes from, of the elders that are still embodying, and the people that went through so much just to be able to carry on this legacy, and they've endured, our ancestors, everything that they had to do to make sure that 500 years later we still know of these things, right? They had to keep it in their heart, they had to keep it safe, and then now it's being shared everywhere, right? But I feel like if we share it with respect, if we help others with respect, I believe that you can, like you said, we don't have enough people helping others heal, right? We need more people doing this work of helping folks integrate. You mentioned at the beginning the integration of the mind, the body, the soul, the spirit. We need more people making efforts to help others do that.
Yeah, totally. And integration of our soul, because I do believe that parts of our soul check out during traumatic events. Our ancestors called it susto. around the world, they call it soul loss. I mean, so that's how I know it's like, oh, we're all tapping into very similar things when it comes to trauma. And in the DSM, it's like dissociation, like,
Association. Yeah,
yeah, out of
absolutely.
body experiences. And so when I went to the shaman for the first time, I took the class and I was like, I asked the professor, where can I meet a shaman? She didn't know. And then one of my mentors I had lunch with, and she's like, oh, I went to a shaman. And I'm like, what? And so I went to the shaman, and the shaman asks, do you need mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical healing? And I'm like, all of the above. I was like 43, and I was like, I need all of it. And so it was amazing. She's like, okay, give me a bullet point list of the traumatic events in your life. And, my birth, when I was nearly died, was the first. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to journey, and I'm going to find all the parts of your soul that checked out, and I'm going to bring them home. And so it was a powerful, powerful experience. And so she had me lay down on her, because she did it in her living room. She had me lay down on her couch, and she kind of guided me through it, and like guided visualization. And then she started to play the drums and chant and play a rattle and sing. And there was a point, and she didn't tell me what she was doing, but there was a point where she started to whistle. And I feel like every Mexican child knows,
Yes.
when your parents whistle, that's bringing you home. It's time to come home, wherever you are playing.
Mm.
So she started to whistle. And I was like, shoot, she's bringing my soul, my baby soul home. And I could just envision in my mind's eye, like this baby crawling back to center. And she was saying, the parts of your soul that were checked out that I brought home, it's not like you have to take care of them now. They're all with you now, like this power, and like this light, and you're going to feel stronger. And it took about 4 months for me to really kind of process and digest the changes. But the best analogy, I like to use analogies, the best analogy that I could give is I still felt like, I still felt vulnerable, but it was almost like, when you have a plate and there's like a hairline crack and you chip it and it like falls apart. That's what I felt like before.
Mm-hmm.
And after seeing the shaman, it felt like a bathroom mirror that used to have like shards, and like maybe the biggest shard was in the corner, and that's where you used to kind of like lean over and brush your hair, like just to, in that little corner where that piece was whole. I felt like now I had a whole mirror, and I could just see myself clearly, and not only myself, but like the world. And that's what it felt like to have all my soul pieces home, is I
That's
could see clearly.
integration.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so I felt like I still felt vulnerable, and I still felt human, but I felt whole. And it was the most amazing feeling. And when I read about shamanism, they talk about how it used to be we'd have access to shamans in our culture, that we'd be able to see a shaman within, 72 hours of a traumatic event. And I was like, we are freaking walking around for 40 years with our maimed souls, like just trying to. But it's
Yes.
like at 40, I got to do the readings. At 43, I got to see a shaman, and like I'll never look back. Like what I want to do, my life dream now for the next 50 years of my life, is I want to travel the world and interview healers, because I think healers have so much wisdom. And I feel like that's what we need now more than ever, is wisdom about how to be whole. And I feel like there's so many similarities around the world. And I just want to talk to them, live with them, sit with them, write it down, and share it with everyone, because la
Yeah.
medicina es para todos. Gracias.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that just resonates with me so much. I mean, that would be, you mentioned that's your plan after you retire. And that would be like my dream plan, travel the world interviewing healers. That would be amazing. But yes, I mean,
The other thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to, because you mentioned yoga.
Yeah.
I'm so down for yoga. I freaking love yoga. A lot of research evidence supporting yoga. Trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk, he loves yoga. TM, transcendental meditation, tons of research evidence supporting it. I have practiced it. My daughter has learned it. I don't know if people know, but in Oaxaca, in the state of Oaxaca, the elders were approached to ask them, is it okay if we teach the school children in Oaxaca transcendental meditation? And they weren't like, oh no, that's appropriate. No, they were like, that's good medicine. Yes. So now there's like school wide, there's hundreds of thousands of school children learning TM in Oaxaca. And I see articles all the time, like, mindfulness in low income communities, or yoga. And I freaking love all those things. I love Reiki. But what makes me sad as a researcher is that most people in low income urban communities are Black and brown youth. And I'm like, and who's doing the research to show that the practices of our ancestors can also be evidence-based if we do rigorous and scholarly research? Because most of, like, when we're talking Reiki, TM, yoga, these are all Eastern practices, indigenous, but Eastern practices. And I'm like, if God sent me to UCLA to get training as a researcher, then I'm going to freaking, I'm sorry.
No, please, no.
I'm not a potty.
Don't apologize. You're okay.
Then I feel like, okay, I'm going to put it to use, because it was not easy. I mean, I went through my divorce when I went back to grad school. I had to walk away from my full-time job. I was raising my daughter. I had a mortgage. Like, I had a lot, but I knew that this is what I was supposed to be doing. And whenever God sends me a message, like through this still small voice inside, I obey, because it's just like, me va ir mal si no. Like, I don't even want to see que mal me va ir. Like, it's always been to my benefit. And so I listen to the small, still voice inside. Some people call it God or spirit. La Santera Sara tells me that our intuition is our ancestors guiding us.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
So when the outside world says you're crazy, that's ridiculous, you don't have to freaking explain yourself. If your ancestors, and if that small, still voice inside tells you, vente para acá por el lado, ¿cómo se dice? The shade,
la sombra, por la sombrita.
La sombrita. Hazle caso a la abuelita que dice, pasa por la sombrita, go walk through on the shady side. You do, even if everybody is on the sunny side and that's what's popular and that's what's hot and they're laughing at you because you're crossing the street, bump that. La abuelita dijo, and so I'm gonna listen. La abuelita knows.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is so beautiful and so inspiring. And honestly, you mentioned the kids in Oaxaca and how a lot of the kids in low income communities here in LA or here in the States are. And yeah, I think it's wonderful, right? It's a way to provide healing, because these practices are very healing, right? But I do also, I'm also of the idea that reconnecting with your lineage, your heritage, your ancestors, and part of that is reconnecting with some of the traditions that were lost in our previous generations, like with our mothers that came here in because they had to work and they had to do it, whatever. They really want, their priority wasn't to let me teach you our spiritual indigenous. They were just focused on survival, right? And so these spiritual practices were lost, but I feel like there's a quest now for remembrance, and there's a hunger that I'm seeing in a lot of the younger generations. And I'm talking about, I'm in my mid 30s, and I see even younger folk, kids in their 20s. I don't say kids, but like in their 20s and even younger, that want to explore their spiritual heritage, through their lineage. And I think that's amazing. And if we can bring some of that into these communities, how much more impact can it have, right? Because there is that soul remembrance now, and it's not just this is a good technique, there's evidence for it, there's research and kids practice it, but then it can be taken in at their level of their soul can remember this medicine, like, yes, this is a return home. I think you mentioned that, returning home in a way, right, of where you come from. And yeah, we don't see that here in LA. Well, I mean, I'm talking about LA. I don't see programs emphasizing or working on that, so I know that you a lot of the stuff that you've put out there in terms of presentations and professional presentations that you've done, you're an advocate for that, right? To bring this into our traditional mental health, or our systems here, and that we don't normally talk about these things, because it's just there's no evidence for it, right? There's no research or
so far,
right?
So because I've seen that other indigenous practices, when they get rigorously and scholarly examined or tested, scientifically tested, they come up good. Like yoga has good outcomes, TM has good outcomes. So I'm not afraid that if our ancestor practices get tested scientifically, I'm not afraid that they're not going to come up. Like you test nopales for diabetes, you're going to see some results. Like, you know what I mean? That's no joke. If they haven't been tested, doesn't mean that they won't have results. It's just we haven't prioritized the money, the funding, the researchers. Who's going to do the research? So that's one. And then the other piece, my brain is like, I feel like popcorn, like it's going in all directions. So I'm trying to keep it together.
Well, it's because this is such a broad, there's so much to talk about just with this, right? So yeah, I know I feel like that too. I think I'm telling you, I think we're on the same wavelength, because I'm like, I want to ask a million questions. And I'm like, okay, I need to stay focused.
I'm gonna stay focused too.
No, so I'm saying that for myself.
No, I'm saying that for me too, because I feel like, my God, I'm very focused.
You can share whatever you want.
Thank you. Okay, what do you got though? Let's follow your.
No, I think you're good. No, that what we were talking about with the kids in school, and here, and especially in the low income communities.
I want them to know, because I know, like, and they're walking to school, they feel like nobody's got their back. They have to join a gang for protection. And I just feel like, oh, babies, you have 50,000 years of ancestors who have got your back. You are not alone in this world. And like, imagine if this kid, this 14-year-old is walking to school, like, imagine the spring and the swagger in their step. If they're like, come on, abuelita, bisabuelita, abuelo, you know what I mean? Like, come with me. You know what I mean? Like, nothing could stop them. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely. The side eye, the microaggressions will be like, bump that. You don't know who I am. This is who I am. Do you see who I am? 50,000 years of ancestors. That's who I am. And the practices that I'm learning at school, or I'm learning at home, or in the community, wherever it's possible. And the reason why I want to do the research is not that I have anything to prove anybody, but we know that for funding, we know that for policies, we know that even to get permission to do some of this stuff in the schools, we need to show evidence. And I'm good with science. Like, I'm not anti-science. Like, I know how to do research. Thank goodness to UCLA. And I'm not afraid of it, and I don't put it down. I think sometimes people put down science because they're afraid they don't know how to do it, or they think like, I don't want to have to test what I believe. And it's like, well, I'm not afraid of testing what I believe. I feel like if you test it, I got nothing to hide. It's going to show up with good results. Let's do it. If that's what it takes in this society to get funding, to pass policies, then let's do it. Go randomized control trial. It's on. Let's do it.
Oh, wow. I could totally see you doing this. I'm excited, to see how your journey continues to unfold in this way, because I think you have, because of your background, in academia, I think it'll just be the best thing that we can continue working, in terms of, especially from a research perspective. That is the next step, right? Because we are remembering, we are having a lot of people start practicing and incorporating, but we need, like you said, that scientific, almost like just like a backup in a way, so we can go into these systems like the school system, like the established medical system, and start offering this medicine, because it's just as powerful. So we live in this, in this day and age where this is where we're at. Like you said, funding, we need this to be backed up by research, so we can get into these established school systems and reach more people. Eventually, that's what the goal is, right? To be able to offer and have more people connect to this medicine, more, especially the kids, the little ones. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Alejandra, this was such a wonderful, wonderful interview. And I know we're coming on an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. But this is something that we can definitely talk for 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 a very long time. And I look forward to more conversations with you on this. And for those folks that I know that you're a professor and you do consulting, but I mean, if there's anyone out there that has a question, perhaps, I don't know, on academia and indigenous studies or spiritual practices, I don't know. I know that I know how I can find you, but if anyone wants to connect with you in any way, are you open to that? Just tell us a little bit more.
Absolutely. So my email is Acuña, AACUNA at csun.edu. I'm on Instagram, and I try to post research findings and things like that there too. So I'm on Instagram at Alejandra Acuña, PhD. So you can email me or you can DM me. And I'm happy to chat, because I do feel like, kind of like this conversation, like when you have the same passion, like it's just fun to talk about what you're passionate about. So, and it just feels like it's like we're vibing off each other, and it just feels good. So absolutely, if you're into therapy or reclaiming your ancestor practices for healing or traditions, whether you're a therapist or not, because our abuelas, did it. You don't need to necessarily, a lot of the stuff like the limpias were done by abuelas. They weren't necessarily done by shamans. In fact,
Yeah,
shamans
yeah,
are
exactly.
no, I'll do the soul retrieval, but like a limpia, you can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, thank you so much for that. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Same here. Thank you, Rosa.
Of course.
Good luck on all your endeavors. I'm look forward to all our continued conversation.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you found it healing and nourishing to your mind and soul. If there's a friend that you think would benefit from listening to this information, please share it. Share about our podcast. If you feel called to, please leave us a review, as this really, really helps boost our presence here in Apple Podcasts, and it makes it easier for others to find us. To stay up to date on new episode releases and special events and projects that I'm working on, you can follow us on Instagram at Inner Healing Paths Podcast. And you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to my website, which is rosachetty.lcsw.com. And I will include this information and links in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing with you again next time.